السويدة نعفس الشوارب جماعة
جوكم يا دروز جوكم بشع احنا السويداء إن شاء الله.
Before Al-Jolani's forces reached the outskirts of Suwayda, the governor-aide was already being pushed step by calculated step towards surrender by restricting it to a narrow set of choices. Al-Jolani's financial arm, represented by the Ministry of Economy, began to strangle Suwayda financially. Meanwhile, his militias turned the Damascus-Suwayda road into a security corridor where every form of pressure was exercised, from the imposition of extortion payments to systematic and carefully planned robberies and abductions. July 12, 2025. The situation in Suwayda is calm. People are living as much of a normal human life as they can. No one here realizes that the following day, July 13th, will mark the beginning of one of the most heinous crimes in human history. A historic turning point after which the lives of the Druze will change forever. June 8, 2025 was no ordinary day. The executive office of Suwayda Governorate headed to Damascus to hold a meeting with Suwayda Governor Mustafa Bakur, who had been appointed by Al-Shara. The purpose of the meeting was to sign a backlog of decisions authorizing the payment of the governorate's financial entitlements, which had been suspended since May 21st. The suspension followed the storming of the governorate building by an armed group that demanded that Bakur secure the release of one of its detainees in Damascus.
أكيد نحن بنرفض رفض تام التعدي على المحافظ بكور.
تعديات غلط. إن فصائل السويداء الوطنية عملت على تأمين خروج المحافظ مصطفى البكور بعد اقتحام مقر المحافظة.
That meeting was a clear indication of the authorities' intention to subjugate Suwayda by economically strangling it.
الموظف اللي تعين مسرح، إذا كان مسرح معناته هذا فقد حقه بالحياة.
هاي النقاط كلها تناقشنا فيها ورفعناها لإداراتنا. تمام.
أستاذ محمد
زملائنا
اجت مع عدم موافقة.
Days later, events shifted to Kanawat. Bakur, heading a delegation from the transitional administration, visited Sheikh Hikmat al-Hijri at his home. He presented new amendments demanded by the de facto authority to the May 1 agreement.
بالنسبة للاتفاق نحن من الآن بدأنا بتطبيقه.
Al-Jolani's proposed amendments included bringing in a proportion of general security forces from outside the governorate, requiring Suwayda's factions to surrender their heavy weapons and ordering those factions to dissolve themselves. Al-Hijri regarded this as a reversal of the agreement and rejected the new demands. Immediately after Bakur's visit to Al-Hijri, a meeting was held in Damascus, attended by the most prominent political, security and military officials in Al-Shara's administration. Also present were the head of the Security Committee in Dara and Abu al-Bara, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham security official responsible for the Druze file. Ahmed al-Dalati, the security official responsible for Suwayda Governorate, also attended. The meeting ended with a final decision: to invade Suwayda, eliminate Sheikh al-Hijri, and impose security and military control over the governorate through a number of Druze collaborators. The final decision received the approval of Al-Shara's foreign minister, Asad al-Shaibani, who, in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, had received Israeli assurances just days before the meeting that the Israel Defense Forces would not intervene to protect the Druze.
إلى الملف السوري وفيه قالت وكالة فرانس بريس إن وزير الخارجية أسعد الشيباني ووزير الشؤون الاستراتيجية الإسرائيلي رون ديرمر سيعقدان اجتماعا جديدا اليوم في العاصمة الأدارية باكو.
And this is where preparations for the attack began. Ahmed al-Dalati and Abu al-Bara moved to the rugged volcanic region of Al-Lajat between Suwayda and Dara. The area is inhabited by Bedouin tribes whose loyalties are divided between two rival branches. One branch is aligned with the Al-Druze family, to which a senior official in the current Syrian intelligence service belongs. The other is aligned with the Al-Baida family, to which the general security official responsible for the area south of Al-Lajat belongs. Control of the Damascus-Suwayda road had ignited a major dispute between the two families. Mediation succeeded in resolving it and in incorporating a large number of Al-Lajat tribesmen into general security formations. Preparations for the invasion began with the mobilization of the Ministry of Defense's 40th Division, which consisted of two main blocks. The larger block was the most extremist and the most intensely mobilized to fight the Druze on the grounds that they were infidels. It included people who had previously been displaced to Idlib and had rejected the 2018 reconciliation agreement. Most of them were affiliated with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Some had previously belonged to the Khalid ibn al-Walid army, which had pledged allegiance to ISIS in the Yarmouk basin in Dara. The second block, which was smaller in number, consisted of new recruits to general security. Most were young men whose primary motivation for fighting was theft and the acquisition of spoils. Preparations for the invasion of Suwayda were not limited to the military and security sectors. Other service ministries also took part, preparing to cut electricity, water and telecommunications in order to conceal the crimes that were to come.
وحتى نقول لكل واحد بده يستلم سوريا يعرف انه امامه شعب لن يهزم بعد اليوم.
On the other side, Suwayda still had no idea what was being plotted against it in secret. The overwhelming majority of residents believed that the solution could never take the form of a military operation in which ISIS would fight alongside al-Sharaa and in coordination with him. The celebrations over Assad's flight had begun to fade, but hope in Syria as a homeland was still at its height.
سوريا للسوريين هذا أمر كثير مهم.
نحن كلنا مش أهل إخوة. لكل محققات وإرادة الشعب السوري.
وتوجهنا دولة دمشق الوطنية اللي ما بتميز بين طائفة وأخرى. لا للتفرد الديني من أي طائفة. بل دولة ما تطلع على ديني، تطلع على انتمائي، تطلع على سوريتي.
ايش يعني سوريا؟ مسلم ولا درسة؟ يا أخي درسة.
مجازر في نظافة البدر.
هاي الشوارع شو؟
To storm Suwayda, combat axes were selected, most of them originating in the eastern countryside of Dara and the Al-Lajit region, advancing toward northern rural Suwayda, the Al-Liwa area and western rural Suwayda. The invading forces assembled at four principal locations: Al-Layat, Buzra al-Harir, Walad and Khirbat Sama near Bosra al-Sham. The plan called for an advance along 7 main axes, from which additional axes would branch out. The invading forces divided the Al-Lajat region into 2 sectors. From these sectors, general security forces drawn from the tribes of Al-Lajat advanced alongside a number of ISIS emirs who were connected to the Bedouins of Al-Lajat through kinship and marriage. In the first, northern sector, the forces were positioned in the Hosh al-Hamad area under the command of a former ISIS emir. From this sector, a main axis was formed, along which the forces advanced to seize the villages of Al-Surah al-Kabira, Khalkala, Dakir, and eventually Lahitha, meaning the entire Al-Liwa area in northern Suwayda, along the road from Damascus. Another axis branched out from this sector. Groups of the invading forces moved east toward the villages of Al-Hakf and Al-Khalidiyah and seized them. The forces assembled in Lahida then continued their advance along the Damascus-Suwayda road, capturing the villages of Al-Matuna and Al-Zuwaymira before reaching al-Zaytun, north of the city of Shaba.
نحن الآن قرية زيتونة هذا تل شيحان ورانا والشباب المعنويات عالية جيش.
The Ministry of Defense's 71st Division also participated on this axis. It seized Al-Safa, Ka al-Banat and Khirbat al-Ambashi in eastern rural Suwayda. In the southern sector of Al-Lajat, the invading forces advanced along a main axis to penetrate the plain, separating the northern and southern parts of Al-Lajat. Along the way, they seized the village of Dama. Through secondary axes, they took the villages of Jarin, Labin and Haran, reaching the village of Arika, where a legendary stand took place and Al-Shara's forces were broken on its outskirts. Commanders from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, a number of organizations that until recently had been affiliated with ISIS, and the Ministry of Defense's 40th Division organized the invasion from the eastern countryside of Dara. The invading forces split into several axes. The first advanced from the town of Buzra al-Harir in eastern Dara toward the town of Al-Daw in Suwayda. From there, the forces divided into secondary axes. One seized the villages of Tara, Karasa, and Najran. Another seized the villages of Sami, Sama al-Hunaydat, and Al-Tira. A third axis headed toward the town of Al-Mazra.
من داخل مدينة المزرعة حاليا قوات وزارة الدفاع تقوم بتمشيط مدينة المزرعة كما تتابعون.
At Al-Mazra, which had been designated as the operations headquarters, the forces from the 3 secondary axes regrouped. They then advanced along 2 further axes, the first toward the villages of Al-Maddal and Kafa al-Laf, and the second toward the villages of Rima Hazem and Walga, and from there to Al-Umran roundabout in the city of Suwayda.
Allahu Akbar. هاي نص سويدة. لواء الدبابات فرقة 42 لواء الدبابات. هاي نص سويدة.
Also from the eastern countryside of Dara, General Security Forces and the 40th Division advanced from the village of Walad along 2 axes. On one axis, they seized the town of Al-Tha'ala. On the other, they seized the village of Kanakir. From those 2 locations, the attacking forces advanced along 2 routes directly toward the city of Suwayda. Likewise, from the southeastern countryside of Dara, groups set out from Khirbat Sama near the city of Bosra al-Sham toward the towns and villages of Al-Mujaymir, Ara, Rasas and Sahwat Balata. They entered those localities but later withdrew from them, unlike the areas along the other axes which remained under their control. Another main axis also took part in the fighting.
خلال صارنا يومين نفاوض انه اتركوا الرهان، لا احد يترك الرهان.
Groups of Bedouin fighters from Suwayda were led by the Syrian Jordanian Rakan al-Qudai, a drug-smuggling baron and Hezbollah's foremost agent in southern Syria, before switching sides and becoming one of al-Shara's men. His groups, positioned in the villages of Al-Mansura and Al-Shakrawiyah and in the neighborhoods of Al-Makus, Al-Mashurab, Al-Harubi and Rujm al-Zaytun around the city of Suwayda, began shelling nearby populated areas indiscriminately with mortars and drones. The aim was to confuse and disperse the Druze factions. They then began storming homes, killing those inside and stealing every piece of Druze property they could lay their hands on.
طبعا هذا اللي قدامنا كلياته تعفيش من محافظة السويدة. الله أكبر، هاي من نص قدام السويدة يا خنازير، جايينكم بالذبح، جايينكم بالذبح يا خنازير.
Additional forces also participated. Alongside all these forces, Al-Shara enlisted the Red Bands, a unit composed of suicide attackers and known as the elite force of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. He also deployed the Al-Harith Brigade, the Special Missions Forces, the 2nd Brigade, Al-Amshat, and the 76th Division. On the morning of July 16th, the balance began to shift. Suwayda absorbed the shock and its people took up arms. A popular resistance began, overturning the balance against the invading forces.
جبل عرب امبارح جبناها بساعة ونص، والله اليوم لنجيبها بأقل من هيك. هاي السباع، هاي النجامة، والغوريم اليوم إلنا اليوم.
Al-Shara realized that the forces he had sent to invade Suwayda, with the aim of killing the Druze and looting their property as spoils, were gradually retreating under the blows of the local population. He therefore summoned additional reinforcements, including Turkmen suicide battalions.
قال وزير الدفاع الاحتلال الإسرائيلي إسرائيل كاتس إن الجيش سيواصل مهاجمة قوات
At noon that same day, July 16th, Israeli strikes hit the General Staff headquarters in Damascus and some of the columns of the attacking forces.
طيران الاحتلال ينفذ أكثر من غارة جوية ويستهدف بها سيارات وقوات وزارة الداخلية التي دخلت.
The transitional administration was compelled to accept the truce proposed by the United States envoy to Syria, Tom Barrack, Al-Shara's ally and patron.
الآن بشكل واضح طلب الرئاسة وطلب الحكومة وقف إطلاق النار بشكل كامل وتام.
لطالما كانت العشائر العربية في سوريا رمزاً للقيم والمبادئ النبيلة التي تدفعها للنفير ومساعدة المظلومين. وقد أثبتت العشائر عبر تاريخها مواقفها المشرفة.
يا جيشنا يسمع الفلاح،
والله الجيش السوري رفع رؤوسنا بالعلا ويدوم عزك يا بشار الأسد ويدوم عزك يا بشار.
The plan changed. The ministries of defense and interior withdrew their forces to rear lines, and al-Shara turned to tribal forces that had once served as Assad's arm in the Syrian desert, and, after his fall, had become an arm of the new authority.
على مستوى الجمهورية العربية السورية كل عشائر سوريا إن كانت قحطانية وعدنانية استجلبت كل خيولها باتجاه فزعة بدو سويدة.
الهجري ما يظل له هجر بده يهاجر من هالبلاد إن الله راح.
Al-Shara's media apparatus began spreading rumors, falsifying images and recycling photographs from Iraq, Yemen and Afghanistan, presenting them as evidence of massacres committed by the Druze against the Bedouins in Suwayda. The United States envoy, Tom Barrack, supported this narrative and went along with it in order to save face for al-Shara and present the conflict internationally as an internal confrontation between the Druze and the Bedouins, one in which al-Shara had supposedly intervened to separate the two sides.
The Syrian state and its leadership intervened with full resolve to halt the internal fighting in Suwayda, triggered by old disputes among local armed groups.
A complex intelligence network led by security and military officials took charge of spreading rumors and fabricating facts in order to drive the tribes towards Suwayda. It achieved what it intended.
ونوجه نداء للعشائر في كل المحافظات السورية التوجه فورا إلى السويداء.
حسب مراسل الحدث توغل العشائر بدء توغل العشائر في مدينة السويداء وذكرت أنه دخلوا.
Tribal columns began arriving to fight the Druze. Integrated among them were groups from the Ministry of Defense's 80th Division, which included a large block of former jihadists who had committed several documented massacres on the Syrian coast.
الحمزات، العمشات، العشاير، الأوزبك، الأجانب، العصايب الحمر هذول اللي يسموه، كلهم كانوا بالحارة.
The military operation reveals that its objective combined a desire for a comprehensive and decisive victory with an effort to impose negotiations by force. The assault was preceded by political, administrative, and economic preparation. This included cutting off public spending, obstructing the Damascus-Suwayda road, and then attempting to amend an existing agreement in order to extract concessions concerning the composition of the local general security forces, heavy weapons, and the dismantling of local factions. The structure of the attacking force shows a heavy reliance on tribal blocks from Al-Lajat and on other extremist formations, with prominent roles assigned to divisions that included jihadists and foreign fighters. This gave the operation overwhelming momentum, especially during its first days.
The next day, the same men returned in disguise. It was Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, sparing neither young nor old. They slaughtered everyone.
Through the tactic of multiple simultaneous axes, advancing from Al-Lajat and eastern Daraa, the invading Takfiri forces achieved rapid breakthroughs in northern and western rural Suwayda. As of the production of this film, tribal forces and general security remain in control of most of those areas and continue to prevent displaced residents from returning to them. From a planning perspective, the operation appears to have been a highly complex multi-layered maneuver, carrying an immense human and logistical cost, and designed with a high degree of professionalism.
نشرنا قبل قليل حصيلة حقيقة الأمر محدثة وهي ليست الحصيلة النهائية 1265
We just released a non-final toll. 1,265 killed in a week of bloody clashes in Suwayda, plus 2,000 wounded. Huge numbers for Syria's least populated province.
هذا الرقم مع حجم مدينة السويداء وهي تعتبر من أصغر المحافظات السورية أو المدن السورية.
The planners intended the multiple axes to disperse the defenders, opened breaches for trained units to penetrate, move rapidly, and leave forces behind them to consolidate each advance. When the first plan failed on July 16th, Al-Shara and those who planned the operation for him immediately altered their approach. The adjustment included withdrawing his forces and pushing tribal forces forward in order to reduce the political and military consequences while maintaining enough pressure on the ground to continue negotiations under the weight of siege and fire.
They
broke in and slaughtered entire families, women and children, all executed. They are absolute barbarians.
A year has passed since the attempted genocide of the Druze in Suwayda. During that year, after its military invasion failed, the jihadist authority ruling Syria moved to continue its crimes against humanity through a policy of genocide by siege and deprivation.
رجعوا يعملوا علينا حصار لأنه اللي ما أخذوه بالبارودي بده ياخذوه بالحصار وبالجوع.
Then they imposed a siege to force what they failed to take by arms, starving us of food and water. But it will fail. Our dignity is above all else.
بكل شيء. يلي عم يدخل هو شيء بسيط جدا ما هو واحد بالألف من هاي اللي بكفي هاي الناس.
It was a year in which genocide, siege, and pressure drove Suwayda to make difficult decisions and to demand the right to self-determination as a guarantee of survival and the preservation of its existence. Suwayda does not know what awaits it in the days ahead, but a collective decision has been made there to resist until the very last breath. Those who have experienced genocide and confronted it will not surrender their children to death again.